the direction that Mobile World Congress is going in is it's more diverse in terms of the amount, the sort of types of companies that are now stakeholders in the mobile world.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was basically Ericsson trying to flog radios to Orange. That was all it is. There was just two companies at Mobile World Congress. And then it's expanded, and and Ericsson's trying to flog shit to more people, like private network gear and all that sort of thing. Orange is setting up all kinds of different communication services to people and getting involved in stuff like security and banking and all that sort of thing. And then we've got all these third parties, and we'll get into this more with the public cloud stuff. Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. Very sorry not to have brought you one earlier on this week, but last week, we've had like 3 storms in a row, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've had Dave, Eunice and Frederick.
Is that really the names?
No, what was the D one? I can't remember. Eunice was definitely one.
Eunice was the bad one.
Eunice was the proper one, but Dave wasn't great.
The last one was Franklin or something.
Franklin, not Frederick. Yeah. So we've gone DEF in quick succession, in 1 week, basically.
You'd have thought they'd have used Dave by now already.
I don't think it was Dave. But that's my default name.
It's not really what you call a storm.
No,
Dave,
Storm Dave. It's a bit too chummy. It's like Storm Geezer. Actually, the next one's G. That should be Geezer. And that meant that the trains are all fucked up. And I have to get the train. And you guys... Well, Pierre...
Dudley.
Back in...
Dudley.
There we are. That's not very stormy either.
Pierre uses Back to the Future style.
Well, he used to skateboard until he got busted. And now he rides his special bike in. But he didn't fancy that with crosswinds going over Westminster Bridge or whatever.
No, I would have taken the tube, but...
Right. No, the biggest nightmare is for me because I have to get a train in, and they were just cancelled all over the shop.
I think they were cancelled just coming from Earlsfield even to London, actually.
Right.
So
and also we thought we're going to be doing one in the middle of the week anyway, so let's just knock it on the head. Yeah. So that's what we did. So sorry about that. But this is going to be a special Mobile World Congress preview one. So we're shooting on a Wednesday. So
is that a big show?
You what?
Is that an interesting big show?
Yes, apparently so.
Never heard of it.
Or at least it hasn't been for the last couple of years. But let's see. But it's the first one I'm going to since 2019. First one for 3 years.
Same for all of us,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the last one really counts as MWC, to be honest.
No.
I think it's
the summer one, last summer.
Aberration. Yeah.
No, I think the last summer one was just GSMA going, Jesus Christ, we better put one on or we're going to have to refund people.
Yeah.
I don't know that for a fact, by the way. That's just my mischievous speculation.
COVID-19 came along.
Yeah, exactly. We think it's going to be about half attendance, but, it's better than a kick in the bollocks. And it's normally too full anyway, so I quite welcome it.
Me too.
So we're doing this on a Wednesday, so it can go up tomorrow or day after at the latest, and you can listen to it on your EasyJet flight at 6 a.m. When the one thing you want to sort of get you through the hell, and it is going to be hell. I'll get onto that in a sec. Is us two with a bit of Pierre talking shit about telecoms. So let me get you in the mood, won't it?
It will, yeah. Do you think it's going to be hell? What, the travel?
Well, no, I'm just like, you remember when we went to Amsterdam for Broadband World Forum, and it was
all right.
It's just the hassle, all the forms and the masks and the bureaucracy. It's not the show itself.
Well, I remember I was getting shouted at in Amsterdam for wandering around a bit of the airport without our masks on.
Right. And then do you remember we went out in the city and you tried to get into a bar and he wasn't having any of it
because my app wasn't good enough, apparently, even though it was supposedly recognised by the Dutch government.
It's the COVID passport.
It was a COVID passport app.
At least we don't need to test this time for either way.
No, I mean, I've still got an issue. I'd really like to go and see my family in the Canaries in the summer, but my COVID passport, because my last jab was July last year, that will have run out by this summer.
Oh, yeah, there's a rule about 270 days or something.
What happens if your third jab was more than 270 days? Do you need to get a fourth
you'll be up to
one?
your 6th or your 7th by then, Pierre. You'll be getting those little loyalty stickers and free pizzas and stuff.
You look like an extra out of Hellraiser by that stage. Fucking pink.
People will be able to siphon vaccine off.
It'll be like in cartoons where the cowboy gets shot and he thinks he's got away with it, and then he drinks some beer and it all comes out of the holes in his body. Well, I'm not having any more, as I've said on this pod, and if that means that I can't go anywhere, then so be it. fact, maybe before the end, I'll have a rant about a story I wrote today about DT getting involved in a global vaccine passport. Oh yeah, it's coming.
Oh, I missed that.
Yeah.
I'll just make sure I'll cut it out.
Yeah. when I go full Alex Jones, and then they're gonna make you get a passport and they turn the frogs gay and all that sort of thing. Yeah, so that'll be a drag, and then we just saw like someone on our internal sort of comms thing said that you can't just have any old fucking mask, let alone the bullshit cowboy masks that I wear. You got to have a special
or
FP,
bandana.
yeah, FPWXYZ certified. You could go in The Walking Dead and you'll be all right mask.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just went and ordered a bunch of them off Amazon. So that's £12 you owe me, GSMA. Thanks a lot, because it's just GSMA thing. You can get into Spain without it.
Do they let you in with a hazmat suit, do you reckon, without
Probably.
an FFP2 mask?
It would be
or
a
whatever?
good sort of send up. Go in some biological warfare suit.
Sorry, it's not an FFP2
So I'm not
mask.
looking forward to any of that. And I'm supposed to be doing all these commercial videos. I don't see how I can talk to someone on camera if we're both wearing masks. So I'm going to have to take them off at some
I'm
stage.
wondering whether when you sit down with people and do interviews and things that they are prepared to sort of be a bit more accommodating, and allow people to take them off.
I don't know. I mean,
because a lot of these videos are going to look a bit weird.
I've
aren't
been
they?
mask skeptic.
No,
from day
I don't.
one.
I think you'll be okay to take the mask off for video. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that nice? No, a little treat.
I mean, that's what they did at Mobile
See, they're not
Congress.
unreasonable.
Mobile Congress LA was like that.
Was it?
No one was wearing masks in videos.
What about just interviews that don't involve video? It's the same thing.
Oh. Can't you just chat to someone?
What's the difference?
Well, because everyone knows that
In fact, you're
COVID
probably even less close.
only
so
circulates at a height of around 6 foot. So if you sit down, you're good.
there is that.
Yeah, they've proven that in restaurants.
Or if you're drinking,
If you
it
get up
doesn't
to have a
circulate.
slash, you got to put it on because then you're 6 foot.
Yeah.
Once you sit down, you're good. You're
Yeah, I
safe.
remember someone freaking out in the White Hart when I stood up once.
Yeah.
But as soon as I sat down again, it was okay.
Oh. Yeah, you could play a little good. Like, oh, ah! Be like that cartoon with the opera singer. Anyway, so I'm not looking forward to any of that, but it should be a good laugh. Got lots of evening larks set up. I expect to be shattered at the end of it.
Yeah, God, yeah.
And and me and Pierre are having fun scheduling all our various commitments, aren't we, Pierre?
What do you do on Monday night, out of interest?
I think I'm going to give myself the night off, although one of my colleagues fancies a beer or two. But
Yeah, but that's the night off.
On the Monday?
yeah, that's just a normal night. Yeah.
Just normal
On
dinner.
day one?
Well, normally, like 2019, which is possibly my biggest one ever,
Yeah.
I went massive on Saturday, about 3 a.m. Sunday, just went to about midnight. And then Monday, I went to bed at 8 and slept
Yeah.
for 12 hours. And then Tuesday, 5 a.m., Wednesday, 5 a.m.
Too much.
So,
I mean, I'd like to not work
Thursday
on...
morning, I was listening to The Wall on the way to the theatre and crying like a little girl.
Oh yeah, you mentioned
Jesus
that.
Yeah.
Christ.
You're
I was
emotional.
just-
Well, I won't even be going.
Shattered.
I won't even be going in on Thursday this time. I'm just going straight to the airport.
What
But
time's your flight?
it's 11 or 12
My
or
flight's
something.
really late. So me and Andrew are going to fuck about at the
But
theatre.
I'd like to not go to dinners on the Monday, to be honest with you, because my day's so hectic that I just won't get anything done, written wise.
Yeah, well, that's it.
And I don't really like the idea of sitting in a hotel room writing stuff up. But then it's like, when else am I going to
Well,
do
you've got
it?
to, innit?
But I'm supposed to go out with Orange, actually.
Yeah. So Andrew,
Thank you, Orange.
we got invited, but there's only one spot, and Andrew gets that.
He's going to that, is he,
Yeah.
Andrew? Okay. Yeah,
Anyway, so yes, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to anticipate what we think will be the predominant themes of the show.
Dinner is going to be the predominant theme of the show.
Yeah. Yeah, we got a dinner on Tuesday as well, haven't we?
With BT, I think,
Yeah,
isn't it?
that's
yeah,
right.
Yeah. I think we're allowed to say these. They're not confidential, are they, this information?
Well, not anymore.
No.
And then we're going out for dinner, just us lot, on the Wednesday. I've booked us
Yeah.
a gaff. So that'd be good. Pierre's not going to be around because he's bailing. Although the great thing about Pierre bailing is it meant there's no possibility of videos on the Thursday.
Yeah.
So we
There
had,
is that.
I think it was 2019, where someone rescheduled a video for the Thursday and I turned
That's
up.
when you had your Pink Floyd crisis moment.
Yeah, I turned up, it didn't go well. Basically, as soon as I'd finished stinking out the joint, they went, right, and they got someone else to come and reshoot the video.
Brilliant.
It was such a car crash.
It was awkward when you started crying midpoint of the interview. Tell us about your company.
Well, my eyes were certainly bloodshot from a combination of alcohol, sleep deprivation, and Pink Floyd, that's for sure. So anyway, so before we get into it, if you're watching this on the site or on YouTube, or increasingly less likely on Facebook, you can also listen to it on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Spotify, and loads of other podcasting platforms. Okay, so I mean, look, on the surface, the themes are fairly obvious. But what I want to do with this is just sort of whet people's appetite, get them in the mood, and then see if we can be a bit of a smart ass and predict what we're going to be reflecting on in a week or so's time. And obviously, the main theme, it's called Mobile World Congress, so it's mobile. It's always one of the G's, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, I was reflecting. I try and write each Mobile World Congress. I try and write one piece that's more of a sort of thought piece from the show, as opposed to news reporting. And the one I wrote in 2019 was 5G reaches an anticlimax at World Congress 2019. My sort of point being that 5G had sort of started to arrive by that stage, and it was a bit meh.
It's pretty early anticlimax. That's real sort of premature kind of.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know why. Don't know why it occurred to me to write a headline like that. I couldn't be more opposite than that, mate. I promise you. Yes, but
it's never been able to perform since, has it?
No, it's been decidedly limp. Maybe someone should.
How old are you guys?
Maybe someone should form a 5G startup called 5G Viagra. So I think 3 years later, it's really interesting. Normally we're comparing year on year; it's a bit more incremental. But 3 years later, we can see where's 5G got. So that's our first theme. I don't know if it actually be helpful for you, Pierre, for me to sort of list the three things I think we're going to talk about.
Well, sorry, actually, little tangent here. Today I was contacted by Three about 5G broadband. They offered me this great deal, £29 a month. But I had to tell them
fixed wireless access.
Yeah.
Or the home broadband.
Yeah, they promised up to 250 megs up, 250 down and 150 up. But I had to tell them,
that's pretty good.
But no thanks, because I'm locked in a BT contract for a year. So.
Right.
But why? I don't understand why you'd go FWA when you've got fixed line. I mean,
because it's faster. It's cheaper and faster.
Well, I don't.
I paid 49. Well,
I'm not sure if it's faster.
Yeah, they'll say 250 down or whatever. What you actually get in practice.
Yeah.
There's a good reason why people do go for it though, because I remember talking to them about this a while ago when you remember UK Broadband that was led by that. What's her name? She's almost a friend of Telecoms.com and has been at events before, but now it's part of the task force. I think
I've forgotten her name.
She was running UK Broadband,
Live.
which was the bit that it was a small company that Three basically bought to get a load of spectrum, but they also happened to have as the name implies, they were the kind of home broadband people. And she was saying one reason people go for it is it's just incredibly easy to set up, and I think cancellations is supposed to be easier as well. It really, there's no cables. You basically just put the thing on your mantelpiece.
And about the thing, actually, I asked them is this like the Huawei router? And they were like, the guy on the phone he seemed a bit nervous. No, it's not the Huawei thing. No. And I said, so who makes it? He said, it's ZTE. I was like, much better.
Oh, brilliant. The ones that are owned by the government. Well, they're not on the naughty list, but probably should be.
I mean,
they're on the UK naughty list, but they're not on the US sanctions naughty list.
I mean, the euphemism we use for Chinese vendors is high-risk vendors, isn't it?
But I mean, my plug is in the entrance of my house, which is not well placed. You walk in and the router is right there. It's
that's not what you want.
It's convenience. She was saying they appeal to a lot of students and people who go into flats for a short amount of time. I think you don't have to sign up to such long contracts. You can you don't have to worry about cables, and you can take it with you more easily and all of this kind of stuff.
£29 a month.
Yeah,
I pay
and pricing's probably good. So I wish I could remember her name. It's kind of embarrassing, but
I know I can't remember it either.
She was good.
She was good. Yeah.
Anyway,
how did we get onto that?
Oh, you're talking about how rubbish 5G is.
That's it. So for the sake of Pierre's captioning, we'll start off by talking about 5G. Has it got any better than it was 3 years ago?
Yes.
Or is it still shite?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we're going to move on. I mean, a natural sort of, I guess, evolution of the 5G chat will be things like Open RAN.
Yeah.
And we might possibly even go into like sort of metaverse and VR, AR, because these are the sort of use cases that they keep labouring. And then I don't think it would be complete. A Mobile Congress preview this year would be complete without looking at public cloud.
Yeah.
So those are the things we're going to chat about. Actually, one other thing I should mention while we're talking about home broadband, they deserve a shout out because I haven't even told them I've done it yet. We've both been wrestling with that plume thing, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah,
God.
I know. What did you try? What I said?
No, I haven't had time yet.
So I'll talk through. So it's interesting. So plume is basically an evolution of the mesh Wi-Fi thing, whereby you plug in little nodes around your house and it ensures really sort of seamless coverage, and the mesh just automatically hands you off from node to node depending on which is the best one. It's basically a way of having a router and just making it so that your whole house isn't dependent on the range of that router.
What's her name? Karine? That woman?
No, I don't think so.
No.
Okay, sorry. No.
I hope you're not going to punctuate the whole pod
I'll
with
find it for you
random
while
female first names.
I'll find it.
Especially, I've noticed you picked a French one straight away. That's just bias. Was it Nicole?
Yeah, that was at other Telecoms.com live.
Right. Well, we've only done one. Only done one live, proper,
Yeah.
face-to-face one. And anyway, it's fairly straightforward. So for the Plume PR people who sent us this thing, and you're shitting yourselves right now because you haven't been able to sort of reassure us about any little quirks we had. Sorry, I feel like talking it now. So there you go. It's fairly straightforward, but I've only got two criticisms. One that Ian and I both faced, which is when you do it through an app, and the app's pretty good, and it talks you through it, and you sort of plug it in, you restart your router, and then the app theoretically syncs with the first one that you plug in, and then just sorts everything out. And apparently it's all linked to the cloud as well, so it like optimizes it and sees how many devices you've got in your house and where people hang out. And it's all meant to be quite clever and AI and all that. Problem is, it wasn't the simple Bluetooth pairing between my phone and the first node just didn't happen. And Ian had the same problem. So we're both close to giving up. And then I just thought, if there's a Bluetooth issue, let's just try turning off the Bluetooth on my phone and on again. Lo and behold, I turn it off and on again, and it pairs straight away, and everything else happens smoothly. The only other criticism I'd have of their instructions is the nodes have 2 Ethernet ports in them. And nowhere in the instructions does it tell you which one to use. It goes, just stick an Ethernet cable into the port and then move on. But it's 2 of them.
Well, this is the other thing I didn't get, though, because you're supposed to connect.
No, they've got different little symbols.
You connect
next to
the pod to to your router.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't want that. I want the pod in another room.
Now you connect the first pod to your router.
Yeah,
and then you've got 3 pods and you got 3 nodes in the kit. Yeah,
the transmitter.
So the first one is like, as PR says, acts as the transmitter.
Okay. That makes sense.
And then you stick the other one at the other end of the house and the other one downstairs, and then it should...
Is it power line thing? That's what I have.
No, I don't think it is. I've used power line, and you do plug them in, but I don't think it's power line. It's mesh. Wi-Fi mesh is a different thing.
Oh. I have power line now at home.
And has it led to massive improvements in your house?
Well, that's what's really hard to say.
Yeah.
It seems fine. It seems good.
Yeah.
We got one test, which is our main telly downstairs sometimes acts up with streaming stuff as opposed to broadcast stuff. So we got one test of that. So I would say as a very sort of rough and ready review of Plume as, setting it up, is all good. But there's nowhere, I went and looked at it on the internet, there's nowhere where they address the matter of it not pairing with your phone's Bluetooth. Yeah. Which I think is a baffling oversight. Nowhere in their FAQs or anything like that. And it's such an obvious thing to do. And the fix was even more obvious, which is just turn your Bluetooth off and on. And then once it happens, it's all good. And then the only other thing is that, each one's got 2 Ethernet ports in it. One that sort of has a globe, which infers a direct connection to the internet. Another one which has a symbol which looks like it could be Ethernet. But you've got to be a geek to interpret these symbols.
So which one does it go into?
Well, that's it. They never tell you. So you have to guess. I decided to put it into the Ethernet one because I think the globe is if you're going straight, if you're bypassing a router, if you're connecting to the internet primarily through the Plume node, I think that's that one. So those are the 2 failings for Plume and their representative, in case you're wondering of feedback. But apart from those 2 failings, The app was really smooth. Everything just happened. It all just kicked in. You can look on the app and see what's on it, and it's all quite high tech. But, like with all these things, it needs to be plug and play.
Yeah.
Is it Wi-Fi 6?
I don't know.
Well, wouldn't you have to have Wi-Fi 6 on your router?
Again,
though?
I don't know.
On your
I
laptop
don't think
as
you
well.
can just have Wi-Fi 6 unless your other equipment's compatible with Wi-Fi 6, which it probably isn't, unless you've just had an upgrade.
I'm showing my ignorance of Wi-Fi 6 there. I don't know the answers to any of those.
What's the max megabits per second?
Don't know that either. I should do a little speed test at home.
Mine is like 300, but it's fine because.
But I mean, it's only going to be as good as whatever I'm getting off EE as my provider.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, so there's that little digression. In case I never write it up, although I'm actually meeting Plume at Mobile Congress, so I might end up reiterating all of this again.
Yeah.
By which time they will have heard the pod and they'll be pissed off at me for moaning about the Bluetooth.
CEO of UK Broadband's Ross Singleton.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she knows her shit.
Yeah. She's not the CEO anymore.
No, she's part
anymore,
of UK Sort Your Life Out.
She's part of the task force, government person, but maybe doing other things as well. I don't know.
She strikes me as someone who has irons in lots of fires.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so let's get on to 5G. So 3 years ago I characterised it as an anticlimax, as you say, to run with the puerile double entendres, maybe prematurely.
Yeah, it's been pretty flaccid since then.
Quite. But now we're 3 years later. Now we're fully into 5G.
Yeah.
Ian, how's it going? Has it all been a waste of time, or is it measuring up, or what?
Well, I'm not feeling satisfied. That's what I mean.
Don't you see all the remote driven 5G ambulance everywhere?
Yeah. These sort of robotic claws hacking people up left, right, and centre.
The trouble is that people got their hopes up. I mean, it was never really going to do anything, I don't think, in the consumer market anyway. I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Because the applications...
Hence those absurd EE adverts.
Yeah, I mean, totally.
Shaving.
People being shaved on Mount
People
Snowdon
landing fucking planes
low
in their living room.
latency and all this kind of
that's what you want.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is that it's not too dissimilar, though, to the kind of broadband speed wars, the stuff we were just talking about. Pierre's going on about Wi-Fi 6 and what speed can you get in your lounge. Well, who cares as long as it works, yeah? As long as your TV isn't distorting when you're trying to stream.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's becoming a bigger problem, actually, that at home with high-definition TV and gaming, people are starting to notice some buffering and that kind of thing. And therefore, if you can sell higher fibre packages to them and it deals with that problem, then it has some kind of value. Not that the operators are making much money out of it, because prices are still low, and they've already got the customers. There's nobody else to sign up.
Yeah.
Apart from a few 90-year-olds who decided to go on the internet during COVID
for the first time. But the trouble with 5G is the applications just aren't. The difference between that and what you can get on a good 4G network, and 4G is now widely rolled out in most developed markets, is not something that a consumer will notice. So they're just not seeing any kind of benefits at all. So we had the back in when we were writing about Mobile Congress 18 or 19, we had the sort of 5G triangle of special shit, which was enhanced mobile broadband, i.e. faster bandwidth, faster throughput, enhanced mobile broadband, massive IoT, which I think you agree, I've always been sceptical that that's a 5G thing anyway, as it existed before. And I'm not sure the extent to which any of the technology that's within 5G massively facilitates it, but maybe we can get onto that. And then the other one was the ultra low latency, super, what's the word for when something's really trustworthy?
Ultra reliable.
Reliable,
I think it is, but it's low latency.
Which was always the more novel one, because that allows for these sort of industrial applications like remote surgery and all that kind of shit.
And there is a lot more focus on this stuff at the moment. So, I mean, talking about things we've done in the last week or so since we did the last one, I went to a press conference last week, actually, that BT did. It wasn't set up as a pre-MWC thing, but they basically, it was quite fun, actually. They invited people up to this Green Planet thing, which is where Tower Records used to be in central London. Yeah. Is now this Green Planet experience.
I once went to that Tower Records when Anthrax was doing an album signing.
Blimey, yeah.
And I got them to sign
So it's in that building at the moment. It's been converted into this what they're calling Green Planet experience, and they're testing it out on the press. And you go in, and David Attenborough's, David
in fact nods it in.
David Attenborough's whatever it's called. I think it's called Green Planet on TV. On TV, isn't it? The actual BBC series.
Yeah.
But it's like an interactive version of that, where you go into rooms and you get given It's all based on standalone 5G. So this is where we should start to see some kind of differences between, the version the non-standalone that we've had up till now that we were just talking about. Not really that much difference with 4G. Standalone brings this new core network along where supposedly you can do some whizzy new things.
Yeah.
And the pitch is that it does make a difference to the consumer experience. So this whole experience in the old Tower Records is based on a standalone private network deployment. And you basically get given a standalone 5G handset, and there aren't many around at the moment. When you go in, you put your headphones on, you go into these rooms, and it's like having a window on this virtual reality world where David Attenborough is standing in one corner,
telling you what a bastard you are for driving
and
a car.
then you sort of scroll move the phone around, and you can see tortoises swimming through the sea, and
turtles,
and hummingbirds sort of landing, and all sorts of natural wonders basically, and it's interactive. You can play games. It'd be really good.
What's
for
the
kids.
5G angle? I'm still not getting it.
Well, this is exactly what I'm saying. That they say you couldn't do it without standalone technology because the graphics is so precise. Like there's one bit when you're walking through reeds, like at the bottom of a river, and I've done it. I've been through the experience, so I can say it's quite compelling.
And it's interactive.
Well,
so you've got an experience.
It's like virtual. It's like augmented reality.
Right.
You've done augmented reality. Yeah. I'm sure. Games like.
So you're experiencing it via your phone.
Your phone is like a window on a virtual reality world. I mean, you must have had that experience where you move your phone around and you see.
Yeah, I like basic AR.
It's like what you're seeing through the phone is not what's behind the phone. It's this other world. But it's very precise graphics. It's really quick and
really responsive.
And you get asked to do things like tap on the screen now, and the hummingbird will fly away, kind of thing.
And there's no lag or delay.
And there's no lag or delay. And then every now and again, David Attenborough comes on and tells you something else. And
why does standalone enable that in a way that NSA didn't?
So. One of the reasons is to do with the processing power. Actually, they use sort of NVIDIA graphics chips in this, combined with Ericsson's sort of core network technology.
It's like a mobile edge type of thing.
It's a dedicated network, and the guys there that I asked when I said to them, "Well, couldn't you do the same thing with non-standalone?" He said, "Well, you just wouldn't be able to provide." And then this gets to the network slicing side of things, because it sounds like they've actually got a slice per user in this environment. So they can only support up to 50 users, but that's enough for what they want to do. Otherwise, it gets too crowded.
So I'd never thought of network slicing in that context. I always thought of network slicing as use case rather than individual users.
Yeah. So, and he said you just would never be able to provide the same guarantees of latency, and it's not just latency; it's actually the bandwidth that you need as well to get that experience.
So you don't have is the word contention when you've got a distinct slice per user. No one's sharing. You're not same resource.
It's completely dedicated to that.
So it wouldn't work with Wi-Fi and fiber?
It's the same for the other. Well, I don't know about fiber,
unique to standalone 5G.
But fiber, you couldn't deal with fiber without Wi-Fi, obviously, could you?
As in, if they told everyone there, here's the Wi-Fi password and you can connect and then do the experience. Would that work?
You're on Wi-Fi then? Yeah. I mean, you might have a fiber backhaul for sure to the building.
But there isn't network slicing in Wi-Fi.
But you're on a basic Wi-Fi.
So you'd be sharing that Wi-Fi with everyone else in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
So the more people that were there, the more degraded.
So you need like
each
10
individual
gigs.
experience.
I mean, Wi-Fi's unlicensed spectrum. It's best efforts, isn't it? Now, I'm sure the people in the Wi-Fi community go, "Well, Wi-Fi 6 is much better than that," and you do get some guarantees. And I don't know enough about Wi-Fi, but the whole point about standalone compared with non-standalone, and one of the things is that you get this ability to. I don't like the word slicing. Really, it's providing guarantees of quality of service. Essentially, is what slicing is. Because slicing doesn't mean anything to a consumer.
Slicing is just a visual metaphor.
If you said to a consumer, they guarantee this experience, or the application developer. So that was the interesting thing. The guys that had written, it's all very well BT standing there and go, "Oh, we couldn't do this with non-standalone," but the guy who was actually the chief technology officer of Factory 42, and they're the people who wrote the app, did all the sort of magic on the AR and all that stuff. He sort of basically agreed. And he said he'd had to become a bit of a 5G expert, during the process. And can't remember his name off the top of my head, but So it's all very convincing.
Okay.
And it worked really well. I mean, I'm not usually taken with technology demos.
I know you're a natural skeptic, as you should be.
But it worked well. My concern would be, is it enough? Something like that. It seems it sounds a bit nichey maybe, and it's like some of the other use cases that get thrown out when they talk about 5G. I mean, some of them don't come up anymore.
Weird one. Andrew just wrote one up yesterday about how. Sorry, Pierre. I know you're going to ask something.
My point is, what if you show up at that exhibition, but your provider doesn't have an antenna nearby?
You don't use your own phone.
They give you a phone.
You have a phone that's your phone wouldn't work because you won't have a standalone handset.
Right, fair enough.
There basically hardly are any, and Apple certainly doesn't have one, I don't think, at the moment. So
Apple's normally about a year behind on that. Sorry.
So it's got to be and this is one of the issues with the rollout of standalone that operators don't have direct control over is handsets coming into the market quickly.
Well, especially now we've got chip drought and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Well, so to sort of steer it back to the first theme of, has 5G been a complete waste of time, and we're initially talking about the consumer side of it. Andrew wrote up a quick thing for Telecoms.com about how Verizon, AWS, Bloomberg Media, and some other company's name I forget, but they've got Zs and Xs. They're basically a fucking winning score in Scrabble, this company.
Right. Not Xilinx.
No. I can't bother to look it up. But no, it's one I hadn't heard of before, and there's a Z in it. Just got together to enable 4K streaming over 5G, and Andrew wrote it up, and I've got a bit of a thing about stories ending on a concluding paragraph, and he obviously was either in a hurry or couldn't think of a concluding paragraph, so he ended it on just a final pulled quote. So I thought, fuck it, I'm going to be the editor. Be the pushy bastard and write a concluding paragraph. And my concluding paragraph was that, this feels like another desperate chase for a use case. Where is the clamour for 4K streaming? I mean, 4K streaming, firstly, 4K at all only matters on large screens. Mm-hmm. I mean, 4K on a phone versus 1K, I mean, you can't tell the difference.
No.
And then secondly, if it's on a large telly like we've got in here, no one can see it, but behind Pierre, there's, what do you reckon it is, about 80-inch telly or something like that?
No. Yeah, 65.
65, well, I'd stand corrected.
Yeah.
Then that's going to be connected via sort of Ethernet, Wi-Fi, whatever.
Yeah.
So I just think it's a completely fucking redundant use case. But I understand why they do it, because this is the central theme. Whether it's your David Attenborough thing or whether it's Bloomberg Media streaming 4K video, I think in the intervening 3 years since I reflected on 5G being an anticlimax, that and obviously I took the piss out of things like robotic surgery and that sort of thing, and we'll get onto the more industrial use cases. But I've just felt there's been this constant sort of desperation to justify it. And, as per our segment, I think the last pod we did where we were talking about 5G, 6G, the G's just a waste of time.
Yeah,
it kind of feeds into that. And I'm just not convinced by certainly any of the consumer use cases that have been put forward. No matter, and that's not to discount how much you enjoyed that live experience, albeit quite controlled experience.
Well, it's controlled.
Zixi.
It's a small private network, and it's the kind of thing it's hard to imagine replicating that on a big scale. I mean, the sort of things they were talking about, I mean, you were going on about low latency, and supposedly you get latency improvements with standalone, and that particular release. For various reasons, partly because it makes it easier, I think, to distribute your core around the network, so you can kind of you can sort of move it closer to the user. You can move network functions more easily. They're containerized, they're this whole cloud native idea of software, which means move it to the edge of the network. It's a bit of a weird expression, the edge, but it's basically, instead of having a few big data centers where your core network is hosted, you could theoretically, I mean, BT was saying theoretically you could go up to about 1,000. I mean, there might not be a need for that.
What?
1,000 edge data centers.
Oh, I see. Right.
Around a country like the UK.
I see.
Now there might not be a need for that, because at the moment, I mean, with 1,000, you're talking about getting latency, they're saying, down to about 2 milliseconds. The guy made an interesting point, actually, because I've talked to people who've said that you can even go above that, and he said once you go the difference between 1,000 small data centers and 10,000 is
diminishing returns.
It's not even worth it, he said, because you're talking about like maybe 1 millisecond difference,
and it's worth
and the
reflecting.
investment required is just not worth it.
It's worth reflecting. The first time I had this sort of properly explained to me was Marcus Weldon, who used to be the chief geek.
Well, it's just
at
a
Nokia.
distance thing.
Yeah, exactly. The speed of light is still the speed of light.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're talking about latencies of milliseconds, distance comes into effect.
But that's why standalone, I think, is important, because it makes it easier to do that. You can take your network functions and distribute them more easily than you can with non-standalone 4G core stuff, basically. And that's why you get these latency benefits. It is a distance thing. It's just that you can package it up.
But that's pretty expensive, making all these edge data centers.
They're not. BT's not planning to do that. I think in the short term, what they've talked about is having tens of data centers where you get latency. So this is the interesting thing about the David Attenborough Green Planet experience. They were saying that latency in that environment was averaging 16 or 17 milliseconds. Right. And they said if it went over 20 milliseconds, it would cause problems with the graphics.
Stop throwing up.
So there's an example of why they needed standalone, because if you did it on a non-standalone public network rather than this private standalone one, you'd end up with.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's questioning. I mean, I remember it was at Mobile World Congress that they first unveiled this standalone thing.
Yeah.
That must have been like 17 or 18. And then once I understood it, I remember we were still working with Ray at the time, well, obviously, being that long ago, and, he had to sort of explain some shit to me. But once I understood it, it was clear that non-standalone was an attempt at creating a sort of interim, bridging sort of status. Standalone is proper 5G.
Well, non-standalone is just hitching the new radio that you get with 5G to the old 4G core, basically.
And what is the new? I'm still not, apart from utilising bits of spectrum they didn't use before, I'm not even that sure what the fuck new radio is.
Well, it's a new air interface.
Yeah, what's different about it?
Well, it's better. It's still based on OFDM, but it's a different air interface, which is why it's faster. That's why you get improvements over 4G.
Is 5G over, let's say, 800 megahertz spectrum?
Yeah.
Is it faster than 4G over 800 megahertz spectrum? A lot?
You'd have to ask.
Because I'd got the impression that the main reason 5G was faster than 4G is just because the sheer scale of using more spectrum, fatter pipe.
If that was the case, then I don't see why anybody would have spent any money on it at all, because you could just roll out 4G.
But isn't it funny that we don't know
spectrum.
That even you, who knows more about this shit than I do, we don't actually know after all this time what is metrics.
I
of
know
how
I'm
much
told
better.
it's faster, but I don't know what the comparison would be if you're using it in the same spectrum band. That's true. Yeah.
We should.
I'm just not interested enough.
Yeah, but someone should have told us that. That should be a cardinal USP.
I mean, the person to ask is
pound for pound, it's 50% better.
Well, you could ask someone like Gabriel Brown, who runs around doing speed tests and stuff like that.
Okay, Gabe, if you listen to this.
Reading. I'm pretty sure he'd probably be able to give you. I mean, look, another company to look at perhaps is someone like T-Mobile US, or an operator that's used it in mid-band where they've used 4G previously in mid-band, and see what's.
But it's interesting that you bring up T-Mobile US, because they got all this 600 megahertz spectrum, didn't they?
No, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about forget the low band stuff, because that's pretty crap anyway for speed. But look at an operator that's used 2 gigahertz spectrum to roll out 5G, where previously they've refarmed stuff to 5G, and previously they'd used that for 3G or 4G.
Yeah, as long as you're comparing apples with apples, i.e. the exact amount, the exact sort of diameter of pipe, metaphorically.
Yeah.
But no one knows. We don't know.
I think it allows fatter channels, doesn't it? That's one of the things.
Yeah, but that's different. Okay, because that's just creating, as you say, a fatter channel, fatter pipe, so more shit can go through, to use the liquid metaphor.
Yeah.
But
that in itself...
If you've got exactly the same diameter pipe over exactly the same bit of spectrum, no one knows what the like for like comparison between 4G and 5G is. Well, that's weird.
I'm sure people do know. We don't. But,
no one. Tell us.
But even if all it allows you to do is fatten the pipe, if it gives you a bigger channel that you can use over.
But that's not about the air interface so much, then, is it?
Well, it might.
It's just about a technology that enables you. It's like carrier aggregation on steroids, isn't it?
But that's to do with. That's all to do with the radio.
But we had carrier aggregation with 4G.
Sure, but you can't do. You couldn't. I mean, you couldn't get the channel sizes, could you?
Yeah.
So
all I'm saying is that we're talking about two distinct things, and maybe your point is that when they're not distinct, and that's fair enough. But one thing is an intrinsic superiority of the air interface technology.
Yeah.
And then another is the utilisation of fatter pipes. Now I get your point that the two are kind of. One and the same thing. I think we should talk about something other than speed because it's kind of the most boring thing to do with 5G. All right, we've done that then. So that's the consumer side.
Yeah.
But the more exciting side, as you were just rather assertively redirecting me towards, is the sort of industrial side, which is where things like IoT and low latency and all that kind of shit comes in. And and there's a piece that I'm going to publish that's hopefully going to coincide with the publication of this pod, more or less, where I chatted to a couple of our colleagues at Omdia about what they think big themes are. And at the end of the conversation, we came to the conclusion that the direction that Mobile World Congress is going in is it's more diverse in terms of the amount, the sort of types of companies that are now stakeholders in the mobile world.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was basically Ericsson trying to flog radios to Orange. That was all it is. There was just two companies at Mobile World Congress. And then it's expanded, and Ericsson's trying to flog shit to more people, like private network gear and all that sort of thing. Orange is setting up all kinds of different communication services to people and getting involved in stuff like security and banking and all that sort of thing. And then we've got all these third parties, and we'll get into this more with the public cloud stuff.
I don't think there's security and banking stuff to do with 5G, though.
No, fair point. This is my broader point. I was going off on a tangent a bit about what 5G has done, and the banking and the security isn't a good illustration of that. What 5G have done is bring more and more different companies into the fold, types of company into the fold. So at risk of me wittering incessantly, why don't you sort of take that baton and run with it on the sort of more industrial B2B perspective?
Yeah, I mean,
5G?
There were examples given at the BT press conference of that too, and actually there was a Deutsche Telekom sort of pre-MWC conference this week where they talked about some of the services they're trying to roll out now that sound potentially interesting. I mean, one that Claudia Nemat, who's a kind of head of technology and innovation, was going on about a lot was this, which I've heard BT talk about in the past, is aimed at the broadcasting sector. So you can basically give cameramen a kind of 5G unit that they carry around. Yeah. And it allows them to record and transmit images.
Exactly.
Much more quickly than the satellite systems that I think have been previously used.
No, field broadcast is a great one. I mean, that's where I thought that thing I alluded to earlier with the 4K was just taking a step too far. It doesn't need to be 4K, it just needs to be reliable.
No, I mean, this is a very, very, I think it's a really compelling service, actually. That's something where you actually can see a use for it because there's no cables involved. The companies themselves are saying they need guarantees, which is where the things like slicing would come in. You've got a very high performance technology being provided, and the satellite systems that they have used just wouldn't allow you to do some of this stuff. It wouldn't give you the kind of flexibility to do it. Yeah. So, but it's quite nichey, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah.
Niche. I like that term.
It's the trouble with some of these enterprise examples is that there've been a lot circulating for years, and we've never really seen any of them.
So the biggest one's coming into practice.
Maybe I'm being unfair that it.
No, I'm just trying to think. I don't think you're being unfair, but I'm trying to sort of argue on behalf of the industry. Ones that do seem to have come into practice that seem to have matured a bit more as things like private networks. I mean, I don't know how many companies are buying private.
I don't think private networks is a good example.
No, why not?
I mean, I think that broadcasting one that I've just talked about is a great example.
But why isn't private networking?
Because I think anything that but that's a classic case of where most of the time you can do it with 4G.
I see.
I don't see why in a lot of these private networks.
What about network slicing and like you're in a factory where all the robots have got to be connected.
Okay, but that's a different type. That's a very specific type of private
industrial
network.
IoT type.
I mean, it depends what you mean by private network.
Yes,
if you're just talking about having some kind of office 5G network,
right? No, I was thinking very much industrial.
Right. I mean, the whole idea of having autonomous robots communicating on low latency links and an AI involved in the picture and things moving along the factory floor that are controlled by 5G
and Skynet
and all that, then great. If that can happen with 5G and it can't happen with other technologies, then I guess I can see the argument that you need the things we've just been talking about. You need the low latency, you need the guaranteed bandwidth. You don't want a lot of cables around on the factory floor.
Indeed.
Wi-Fi probably wouldn't be good enough because of the sort of guarantees issue. Yeah, so maybe this is where it's all going. I think we're sometimes. I'm quite sceptical, and as a journalist should be, and you are as well. Yeah. But maybe we're just expecting too much too soon. I think this is the problem. Standalone's only really now starting to be rolled out. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of these. I mean, if you talk to Nokia and Ericsson about, I think it was Nokia I was talking to maybe a year ago or even before that, where they were, sort of envisioning what the private network might look like in the future and talking about some of their customers. And you look at the German industrial groups that have even acquired their own spectrum and car companies, they have to build a factory that's set up to do all this.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a multi-year investment.
They can't just suddenly refit one by sticking a couple of
5G's here. Now we can
plume nodes in there, and suddenly it's good to go.
Totally, it's like building a semiconductor. All this semiconductor investment that's being talked about at the moment. Oh, let's have these great Ohio fabs.
Yeah. They take years to build.
And it'll sort out the semiconductor crunch. Well, it won't, because they won't be ready until 2026. Yeah. It's a multi-year investment, and it's the same with this a lot of this industrial 5G stuff. It probably will. A lot of it probably will happen actually, and then maybe we'll be looking back in the sort of mid 2020s or the late 2020s, going, 5G came into its own in the end, didn't it? And it's not a consumer thing. Okay, fair enough. But there's been a huge amount of interest in industry at long last.
Yeah, and there'll be reports from Omdia or Delora or whatever going, the total value of fucking about with 5G is 10 zillion quid this year.
Exactly. But now, who makes the money from that? I don't know, because I suspect.
Well, that's the biggest question.
This is a big question.
That's the diverse question.
Will the operators benefit? I don't. This is a problem. You were talking about there's all these new companies coming into the market. It's not just the people who want to take advantage of that technology, and the reason they do is obviously because they just want to be more efficient. Again, the way they produce cars is it's not necessarily going to change the end product they sell to their customer. It might do, but it's the stuff they're putting in the factory for efficiency's sake is really to sort of lower costs, isn't it? That's what it's all about.
Yeah, lower costs, I suppose, in principle, eradicate human error.
Lower costs, speed up manufacturing.
Yeah, get them out of the door.
But the people who are going to sell that to them, well, look, if they're buying their own spectrum, which some of them are, then potentially they don't want operators involved, because that's the big asset that operators have that other people haven't had until now. So that's an opportunity then to cut those companies out of the picture entirely and maybe just go and work with Ericsson or Nokia. And then the issue for Ericsson and Nokia, of course, is the public clouds. People like Microsoft with its acquisitions even the year before that, of Metaswitch and Affirmed. I think that was a big enterprise move, actually, potentially, using those companies which do sort of 5G core technology, core products, to help them build in the future 5G private networks. I mean, they want to be in that enterprise space. A lot of these companies, you get specialist firms that no one's really heard of, targeting the same opportunity. I mean, it's a really competitive market, and I don't think it's clear who's going to be the winners in that at the moment.
And talking about other people being cut out of various things, one of our most read stories, in fact our most read story in the last week or so, is one written by Nick, headline, Nokia's Kyndryl partnership could leave telcos out in the cold. So this is I think an edge partnership between Nokia and someone I'd never heard of before.
Yeah.
I'm feeling more and more shit at my job every
time.
Well, I haven't
heard of them, Kyndryl.
Okay, right.
I don't know. No.
But it was Nick's headline, and he was right to characterise it that way. Yeah. And that feeds into what you're saying. And I don't want to go down the public cloud thing too much, because we've got that as a segment.
Yeah.
But the broader that does feed into the broader initial theme of 5G. Who's involved? Who makes money out of it? Who's going to make the magic happen? All that sort of thing. It's never been more up in the air.
Yeah.
With this G than with previous Gs. We knew, like with 3G and 4G, it was mainly about mobile broadband. So it was about vendors enabling operators to serve up proper serviceable mobile broadband to their customers. That was quite a clear narrative. And then all the shit comes with it, Uber or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder to get your head around with 5G, isn't it?
Yeah, and the trouble with operators, I think, is not necessarily that there's anything wrong with 5G or with a lot of these visions of the future. It's that their whole business model is just wrong. Yeah, I mean
operators.
They used to sell calls and messages, and now they sell gigabytes, and the way they charge for gigabytes now is that you use as much as you want and you pay a flat fee. It's increasingly going that way. Well, once you've got all the users in the world signed up to this packages, where's the growth? And they probably sell a lot of this stuff to the whole private networks thing. Well, it's great having a company that has a deal with you for usage, but it kind of works the same way. The deals that they've had in the past, operators have had enterprise relationships for a long, long time. Informa will have a contract with a telco, obviously, for all the stuff that we use when they're in the office.
Oh, and for people who get work mobile phones, which I don't. Thanks a lot.
And there is obviously more to it then. There's a managed services angle then, of course, and there's an IT component. But a lot of it's just the same model, isn't it? It's all about what you're using each month, and you have this many users and you're using this many gigabytes, and here's what it's worth.
It's sort of metered utility type of thing.
So going into this world of we want to do, robots moving around factory floors and they're controlled on low latency connections, and how you monetize that. I mean, I very much doubt Microsoft and AWS are sitting there. I mean, I don't want to keep bringing up the public cloud as you say we're going to talk about it, but
we can move on to it.
They're probably not going to be...
It'll fuck up PS captions, but I don't care.
They're not sitting there thinking, how do we charge for this on a gigabytes basis? They don't think about it that way, and that's exactly how operators have worked. That's how most of their business is done.
What would you have them do instead of that? What should their commercial relationship with their customers be, if not metered billing?
I don't know. That's the big question. Yeah. I mean, if I knew the answer, then I'd probably go and work for BT.
I'm not saying that you're wrong to criticise them just because you don't have an alternative, but it does beg the
problem
question.
that they have, compared not only with AWS and Microsoft, but also Ericsson and Nokia, is that they're basically just utility companies selling. Spending a lot of money on infrastructure in the way a train company would spend a lot of money on infrastructure, and then running things along it and selling what they run along it to customers. Whereas people like Ericsson and Nokia spend 4 to 5 billion each year on research and development, coming up with new products. Microsoft and AWS do the same. I mean, the amount of innovation in those companies. Yeah. There's a lot of innovation in Ericsson and Nokia, but people would say even more so in big tech. The kind of stuff.
People like AWS have got so much more money to spend because their revenues are so sick.
Huawei, the big one that obviously is now having problems in Western markets, but they're still pumping like 20 billion a year into R&D. And
they got a big presence at Mobile Congress. They've got a big presence at Mobile Congress. They haven't just decided to fuck off Mobile Congress.
And where have they gone since all these issues that they've had recently as well, that they can't sell equipment to Western operators? What have they decided? They've got into software heavily, developing software for cars, developing
we'll see how that goes,
5G software for mines.
But they've got to try something, haven't they?
I bet it's going pretty well in China. It might not go very well in Italy.
I don't know if that counts, does it?
But
I mean, I don't know how, with all due respect to Huawei and China and all that sort of thing, I don't know how rigged the Chinese market is. And I've got some sympathy for it in favour of Huawei, because if I was Xi Jinping and America decided to try and put Huawei out of business, I'm going to use all my centralised power within China to make sure they don't succeed.
But what I'm saying is that I don't doubt that it's pretty good.
Yeah, it won't be
That's what I'm saying, is that they've got a reputation for quality now that they never used to have 20 years ago, and they were just viewed as a copycat. Yep. They've come out with really innovative products. I mean, you talk to operators in the UK that never wanted them banned, like this is the best firm in terms of what it can do with efficiency. I bet you anything that the software they're providing for some of these some of these use cases, cars, connected cars, mines or whatever, I bet it's I can't see it being rubbish, you know. And operators just don't do that, do they? They don't spend money on R&D. I looked today, because for something I wrote that's due to be published next week, but I looked at the R&D spending of NTT Docomo, which is actually one of the operators that has a bigger R&D commitment than most. I think possibly it spends more than any. Last year, it spent about $800 million on research and development. Well, compare with, I mean, you're putting that next to companies that spend billions. You know, even Nokia and Ericsson, which are criticised for not investing anywhere near what Huawei does, they're spending 4 or 5 billion a piece each year.
I'll tell you another little factoid I heard on a podcast recently. China produces more, I don't know whether it's STEM or engineering or whatever, let's say more engineering graduates per year than America has engineering graduates. Right. That was I don't know how accurate that is. I just heard it on a pod. It's probably on Rogan or something. It's probably one of these crazy people that keeps getting him in trouble.
This is the worry about...
But there is definitely, in terms of R&D talent in China, there's definitely a shitload of it. Yeah,
and that was the... I mean, this is a slightly tangent, but it's a point that Ericsson's boss made when I talked to him quite a long time ago in August, when he was talking about standards fragmentation and what might happen. And he was saying that the concern for him was partly that a Chinese ecosystem might just race ahead, because you've got a market of 1 billion, 1.4 billion people, and highly regarded academic institutions these days, companies that spend a lot of money and that are highly, it's not just Huawei, Alibaba, look at a lot of the other tech companies there. You've got this sort of installed base, I guess, that they can build on with a huge population.
And actually, I was mentioning the Omdia piece that I'm going to try and publishing to coincide with the publication of this pod. So Evan, one of the Omdia analysts I spoke to, made that point in one of the canned quotes that I've got from him in the story of how that could be a major theme of this Mobile World Congress, is this bifurcation, this schism that you were just talking about. And yes, I agree with both of you. Yeah, and we've both been talking about it plenty of times. What it's given that. The West, led by the US, and I wrote a very grumpy piece this week, actually. You covered that Ofcom thing about how they're going to sort of limit access to Huawei fixed line stuff in the UK, and we both covered it. We both covered it like a day or two after it came out.
Yeah, well,
I only covered it because I saw you covering it. I thought, shit,
I covered it on Monday, but then due to editorial hold-ups on the
I didn't even get around to writing it up until Tuesday.
Yeah,
but mine was, Yours was more sort of analytical. Mine was more grumpy on how it just winds me up how the way they framed this thing was, we're doing this because of US sanctions. So the way I chose to characterise it is, US says jump and we say how high. And that's what I got grumpy about. I've got a problem with the US. I've just got a problem with the UK just being so supplicant, being so passive, so obedient.
Well, but I think their worry is, and this was something that the Cybersecurity Office raised when the US started imposing those sanctions, is that they can't. So Huawei used to get its components from US development. Now, if it goes and gets them from China, and we don't know what the supply chains are anymore, then it becomes more a risky kind of thing.
No, it's all there. And it could be that my grumpy article was quite irrational and inaccurate. But I just think
because it is pressure from the US.
It was the way it's framed by our mate Doris, who I now just call Chief Censor in my stories. As we got to make sure we don't piss off the Yanks. And it's like, well, why do we have to? Anyway, that's another thing. Okay, look, we've been going for ages and we haven't got to the other two things yet. Pierre's starting to break out in a cold sweat. Let's quickly talk about Open RAN and then conclude on public cloud.
Yeah.
As I've been successfully fending off public cloud until now. So Open RAN's bound to be a big thing. And that feeds into the sort of more diverse ecosystem of players thing. Yeah. So as we, Open RAN, God, it's probably over the past year probably been the most frequent topic on this pod. And I think Pierre did some analytics, and generally the Open RAN ones do quite well, don't they? So, just to recap, Open RAN is about bringing basically diversity, vendor diversity, into the radio access network, the RAN. Do you think, Ian, as I do, that a lot of people are going to be chatting about Open RAN at this year's Mobile Congress.
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the big themes. I mean, there's already been some tasters, I think, in the run-up. I actually wrote a story on it based on the Deutsche Telekom press conference. It wasn't the thing they led with when they did their
preview thing.
Their preview. I mean, I'm a bit disappointed in Deutsche Telekom, actually, I have to be honest, because they normally have a big press conference at the show on the stand, and they've gone virtual this year.
Vodafone's not doing anything either. I was hassling Jamie. He's like,
Vodafone rarely does a press conference.
Okay. Yeah, but they don't seem to have any presence at all.
They often put Nick Reed in front of some journalists to answer questions, and I always used to get myself onto the invitation list after pestering them a bit. You find yourself sat with Telegraph and the FT. And
proper journalists.
People who are more important than you are, but you can sort of wangle your way in. But I asked the right guy, not Jamie actually, Simon Poulter, and he said he's not doing anything this year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I ended up getting directed to Simon as well. And we know Simon from way back because he used to be at Nokia. He used to be their main UKPR. Hi, Simon.
But some of Orange is doing a press conference on the Monday afternoon with their CTO on the stand, and yet Deutsche Telekom's decided it wants to go totally virtual and do it a week ahead. Now, they said that they'd taken feedback on the call from journalists who asked for that, so maybe they're just doing what they think people want.
What a bunch of pussies.
But, and it was a good update. I mean, it's very professionally done and produced.
You could almost say efficiently done.
They had efficiently done, yeah. They had Claudia Nemat, who's kind of CTO. She's sort of she's board level. She's kind of the head of tech and innovation, and she was talking about various things. So the slicing thing that I mentioned with the people, doing broadcasting jobs, running around with these 5G backpacks on. This weird thing that they've done with Robbie Williams, where it's some kind of AI-inspired mashup of Moonlight Sonata and Angels. It sounds like an absolute horror show, but
we had to take the piss out of that one.
Yeah, and they gave a little sneak preview of it with him with a sort of constipated expression on his face that singers have when they're trying to look really
Robbie Williams, who was successful only slightly more recently than Beethoven. Hey.
I mean, but if Beethoven was around now, he'd be glad he was deaf, yeah?
Do you know what I mean?
And then they talked about Open RAN a bit.
I was going to say, I'm trying to steer it back there.
So the thing that they're not moving very quickly on Open RAN. Deutsche Telekom is my takeaway.
Okay.
They set up this Open RAN town, which is in a place called New Brandenburg in Germany.
That's right, I remember that. Why do they need a New Brandenburg? What's wrong with fucking Brandenburg?
It looks nice, New Brandenburg. It's got like sort of old city walls, and they always do these things in nice
if I was
places,
from Brandenburg, I'd be like, what are we? Chopped liver?
Yeah. Despite the name, it seems quite old, New Brandenburg, because it's got like a medieval wall, and
perhaps it was new in like 1087 or something.
And they've got they talked about doing this. They call it Open RAN Town there back in late 2020.
I remember writing that.
And then I think at the event they had last year, they announced a load of vendors they were working with there. And so you were sort of thinking, well, are they going to say something more substantial? And I guess in a way, so she basically said they have a request for quotation out at the moment to do a commercial deployment potentially. It was very much potentially. It wasn't like we're definitely going to start using Open RAN in 2023. Yeah. But she said she wants it to be deployable from 2023.
So there's lots of dipping of toe in the water.
And there's an RFQ, which suggests they're kind of being serious about it. And then I managed to get a question in. About who they're using, and they'd already talked about their vendors, but so it wasn't like I was expecting her to say, well, we're definitely going to go with so and so. But she did the two companies she named, which is interesting when people when they have to name a company and they come out with two and there's 10 on the list, were NEC, which is a Japanese firm developing sort of massive MIMO radio units.
They've been smashing it on Open RAN,
and Mavenir.
Right, another one
which is interesting because she started off by talking about Open RAN as pretty much as you've just done. Like it's an opportunity to get more vendors into the picture. At the moment, we have to buy the radio unit and the baseband from the same company. With Open RAN, we can basically get them from different suppliers. Well, NEC would do one bit, and then Mavenir would do the other. If you think about it, kind of that way, and she does end up using those companies, but it's all. It just seems to be moving quite slowly. I mean, maybe I'm being unfair on Open RAN and that it's always going to take a while to get this thing going.
We've had pods in the past where we've gone, is it a 6G technology?
This is the thing. The other question I asked was, is it too late for 5G? You know, I mean, Deutsche Telekom in its last earnings report, they said that their 5G network now covers 80% of the German population.
So they've kind of done it.
I mean, 80, that's really impressive, considering that BT in the UK is on about 40%. To be at 80%.
Have they done any of that cheaty refarming low frequency
probably, yes.
stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what spectrum they're using and whether it's real 5G and all this, you know, who knows. But the point is that they're putting in antennas, they're putting in base stations, they're going up and down the country. And they're not going to stop now, are they? They're going to carry on developing this network over the next couple of years. So
one thing I'll say about Germans, once they start, they don't stop. Exactly.
So the question is Open RAN just too late for 5G? And she kind of denied that and said, you know, we're serious about it. We want to start potentially using it from 2023. But I just think it's a bit like Orange. If you talk to Orange and even BT, I think Neil McRae was saying this as well, and he's more sceptical, I think, on it than other CTOs, that it's probably going to get used in small cells. And some of the stuff we were just talking about, actually, private networks, you know, an opportunity to
Greenfield
stuff, totally new deployment.
But people aren't going to swap out existing tried and tested
Why would you
kit.
do it? Exactly. Yeah. Whereas these Greenfield deployments are an opportunity to get new people in, like Mavenir, like NEC, you know, use some of their equipment on a totally fresh build out, and then you're not interfering with anything that you've already put up. But it's quite, you know, unless those kinds of private networks all of a sudden sweep Germany, and we have lots of it happening from 2023 onwards, it just doesn't sound like a substantial. It's not a big macro network opportunity, is it? Basically, that's the thing. And I think that's what people are wanting to see, is where Open RAN can fit in on that side of things.
Yeah, it does make me a bit surprised that Vodafone's gone so quiet at this Mobile Congress, because they're a big cheerleader of Open RAN, you know, and they could turn up and bang on about the.
Well, I think they're probably quiet because of their issues that they seem to be having with it. But
have they got issues with it? Is this something I knew about?
Well, no, I mean, they have this 2,500 site rollout, don't they? I mean, they had this announcement a few weeks ago about how they got the first site live,
right?
Except there was no antenna involved.
Yeah. Oh, that's what you mean by the issue.
Well, that's not really Open RAN then, is it? To be honest. And also the vendor, this is the other thing I find curious about Vodafone's announcement is, you know, Claudia Namak's like, we need different radio units from the baseband provider. Well, Vodafone's is Samsung for radios mainly, and Samsung for baseband software. So you're kind of using the same. You can call it Open RAN and call it whatever you want, but if you're still using the same company,
or you could just say Samsung's a new 5G vendor.
Yeah. And then they themselves have said they've got issues with what to do about 3G, because Samsung doesn't support and Open RAN companies don't support 3G. So do they? Yeah. You know, they're trying to phase that out as quickly as possible.
Do you think Samsung's going to be banging on about Open RAN at the show?
Well, I'm meeting Samsung, so I shall ask them.
You shall find out.
But and then the other issue, I think, is, you know, this. It's all very well, this 2,500 site rollout, but what about the other 3,500 sites that Huawei, you know, supplies to Vodafone? What are they doing about those? You know, they're the only company that seems to be.
I see.
You know, I mean, I suspect they're probably waiting to see what happens on the initial kind of Open RAN rollout with the 2,500 sites before they make a decision perhaps about the rest of it. And some of those will maybe be in it's like communities where it's harder to do. But
it's like a very large sort of field test.
I mean, it's a bit of a risk. It's what Vodafone's doing. You've got to commend them for taking that brave step in a way of doing it. But I just don't.
Yeah, I'm just surprised they're not following through and making a bit of noise about it at the show.
Well,
but, you know, maybe some, you know, maybe this is another theme of the show, that some companies are still like, I think I'm going to wait another year and wait for it to get fully back up to speed. Or maybe, you know, this is some inference that we've been getting from Ericsson on, it did its little pre-show thing, where it was banging on about these radios that were a bit better. I can't remember why. I think they're a bit greener. It's always the same
old story with Ericsson, isn't it? It's that they're a bit lighter, a bit more energy efficient. They only weigh a gram now, so you can put it in your pocket and you know, go down the pub for a while and then install it afterwards if you're an engineer, and
lob it at a wall like some bit of silly putty. But they made something, and it was it wasn't in response to journalist questions. It's part of their pre-prepared remarks. They're like, well, we'll see, but you know, they always used to do Monday morning a live thing.
Well, they're not doing that,
Now
are
they're
they?
doing it virtually, I think. And they were making noises about, well, we're just not sure if it's worth the fucking hassle anymore. Obviously, they didn't say it that way.
Do you know what? I'm a bit disappointed with Ericsson as well. I mean, this is a theme, actually, I think, that we should introduce into the podcast at a late stage, is companies not properly going. And,
half-assed. Well, it was the Vodafone thing that made me think of it.
My view is that I think some of these organisations that are exhibitors and that have spent a lot of money in the past at MWC, we're sort of secretly hoping that maybe MWC would just kind of go away, and and it would all become a lot more virtual in future.
Well, and the flip side is they've had to adapt over the last couple of years.
And they've had to adapt, and now all of a sudden it's come back, and there's quite a lot of interest among people. We know that from emails we've been getting and outreach we've been getting, that there's quite a lot of people, it seems, who do want to go.
People want to fucking buy videos, don't they?
There are going to be press conferences happening there, and some of the companies I think are quite resistant to going back. And I'm not convinced it's because they're worried about health and safety, I'm afraid, anymore. I think it's because they want to cut costs, and they don't see that they did very well.
Maybe the ROI isn't there. I mean, we've always...
Well, I don't think the ROI is there. I think
we've always said that we think that the GSMA takes the piss in terms of price.
I can sort of understand it in a way, because I don't think the ROI is there. Ericsson had its best year ever, I think, in terms of profit during the pandemic. They sold in terms of the increase in profit since the last year.
And their stand probably costs like £1 million.
And their stand probably costs a huge amount of money. And everybody's going, well, unless you can meet your customers, you can't do the deals. Well, you can do your deals because companies need to buy core network equipment just because they can't meet.
They're not going to go, right, no, on Zoom, I'm just not going to have a network.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think what's happened is people they want to go to a physical show. It's not a company-driven thing. I think it's more of a kind of groundswell.
I'm looking forward to it.
Exactly. It's people like us who like the idea of meeting.
I've got to admit, I'm looking forward to the evenings more than I am during the day.
But even during the day, I think on a professional level, I think people like the idea of meeting up again. And
I was forgetting about professional for a second.
And sort of, not having to do a Zoom type thing, which we're all a bit sick of over the last 2 years.
Certainly did that. I even did that with some of my mates, and I don't think we're ever going to be able to look at each other the same way again.
And that's why I just think, why are you still trying to sort of... I mean, this whole thing about we need to be safe... I don't. This is Eric's... I got this from you secondhand, that this message came out at the press conference about...
Yeah, like their stand's clearly going to be... Because their stand's normally rammed, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they're clearly going to police...
I mean, I'm sorry, Ericsson, but that's total bullshit, yeah? You've got a hangar-like building there with no windows at all, very little ventilation. It's going to have several thousand people at any one time.
Super-duper masks.
Do you seriously think that if you have a monitoring system where you don't allow people onto your stand as much, that you're going to do anything at all to reduce the spread of COVID?
Do you know what I think they're going to do? I think they're only allow blonde people on.
They've all been vaccinated. They've probably all been boosted.
I'll get in and you won't. Although I'm more grey than blonde these days, but believe it or not, underneath this grey is some blonde.
I mean, I don't want to come across as someone who's trying to belittle coronavirus and make it out to be not a big deal. But
it's not a big deal now. I will belittle it.
Right.
Now we're in the era of Omicron. UK has announced all the restrictions, all the coronavirus stuff's gone.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it's dealt with. And for there still to be... It isn't to have a go at Ericsson. Ericsson were the first to bail in 2020, and in hindsight, they were right. Yeah. So I'm not having a go at Ericsson for being risk averse. In the way they would characterise it.
But it's stupid risk aversion. I mean,
I think it is now. But it's not just Ericsson. The fact that I've had to go off to Amazon and drop £12 on these super duper masks.
The situation in the UK is really interesting because, as far as I can see from travelling around a little bit, very few people now on the trains that I use wear masks. No. Right, that's been the situation for a long time. Actually, we've got half the
people who do are wearing these cloth masks that everyone knows do,
which don't work. Yeah. And I'm even suspicious actually about the other ones, to be honest with you.
Well, yes,
but whether they're really that effective. But the situation is that we have lower deaths at the moment than we normally do at winter. Overall deaths are lower now. Right. Excess deaths are lower than they have. They're basically at normal winter levels, essentially.
Yeah,
and this thing's become endemic. Yeah, it's with a vaccination program.
We've all had Omicron. It's just a done deal.
It's obviously still a risk to older people and vulnerable groups in the same way flu is a risk.
I'm
to
not
those
sending
people.
my dad to my World Congress,
but it's got to the point where people saying you can't come on the stand and we need to restrict things is, I'm sorry, it's just fucking stupid. You know.
Well, I think what it is, and I'm sure this won't just be Ericsson. I don't want Ericsson to listen to this to think we're having a pop at them uniquely. But what it is, it's performative. And I understand why big companies need to be performative. They have to jump through all these hoops to show that they give a fuck and all that sort of thing. It's similar.
Maybe they're worried about getting sued by employees who get ill or something. You know, maybe that's what this is to do with.
And we've got CSR and ESG, and companies got to have to tick so many boxes to prove they're nice these days. And this is just going into the mix. But anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, and we're running out of time. So I'm going to steer it back onto last bit, which is public cloud. So in the summer one, famously Danielle Royston, formerly of this pod, because she's got all this cash just kicking about.
Yeah.
I mean, now I can think of it, when we went out with her after, we should have got her to take us to the Ritz or something, because she's got so much wedge. Or, take us to the poshest restaurant in Mayfair. And why don't you spend some $1 billion on us? I mean, I'm not ungrateful. That Yeti remains the best bribe of the week, but, you could afford even more, Danielle. Anyway, so Shell was cash, and she went, fuck it, I'll have Ericsson's stand in the summer. We don't know what she paid for it, presumably some kind of discount.
Several million, she said.
She said several million?
Yeah, that's the figure she's thrown out, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. God,
which makes you wonder...
Think about what Ericsson's
Well, exactly.
10 million or something. I mean...
remember what... Sorry. Huawei, I mean, this is not really directly related to GSMA, but they hire like design agencies for the pavilion. That's like hundreds of thousands just before they even lay anything.
Well, I think with all due respect to Ericsson, Huawei's stand's actually even better, because they got that thing at the back where we often do videos, like the outside bit, and they've got constant buffets with like pro-Chinese food and shit going on, and they got little rooms, and it's all...
It's funny, the first year I did Mobile Conquest, it was just a parking lot, and then they were like, ooh, we could do something with that.
Right, then, were you that bit at the back?
And the GSMA was like, yeah, we'll sell you the parking lot.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, GSMA will sell you shit, don't you worry about that. Public cloud. So Danielle did that, and her thing is obviously public cloud. And we didn't go.
Yeah.
But by the sounds of it, she used the square footage to sort of let sort of other stakeholders in the public cloud / telco ecosystem sort of go, this is why it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And I haven't really chatted to her since then to get a sense. Well, I mean, she's been on the pod since then, but we didn't really bring it up to get a sense of how well that went. And obviously, Danielle being Danielle, she's going to go, it went great. But I don't know. I mean, she's not doing it again this year, so it can't have gone that fucking great, can it?
Yeah, I think she's made a big mistake not going back, personally.
Right, why is that?
Because I think it doesn't...
Momentum and all that.
The momentum she got last year, I think I'm trying to sort of put myself in her position and rationalise it from her perspective, and I suspect that she's thought if she can't go back and have a big event and be the centre of attention kind of thing.
What are you suggesting?
I'm not saying that she needs to be the centre of attention, but I think last year she was obviously the talk of the show, and she
got a lot of buzz around it.
And she got a lot of buzz, and she's perhaps worried that if she goes back, and she's not going to get that stand obviously because it's kind of Ericsson's.
So then she's got to have some lesser presence.
So then where's she going to get like a booth which looks a lot smaller, most of the booths? She's probably thinking it makes it look like I'm been diminished by. I'm coming back, but I'm much smaller, and therefore a better marketing message is maybe to have it virtual and do it that way. I mean, she's going herself, as I understand it, but
it was really a lot of work, and it was just 6 months ago for her. So
there's that as well. I mean, and also,
look, strike me as she's lacking in energy, though. She's a fucking tennis player, man.
I don't think it's the energy, but I suppose, I mean, the message I think that's come from her organisation and her handlers and all that, and I can sort of believe this to some extent, is that she generated enough buzz last year to actually keep her busy and have enough to do. And I don't doubt that. There's quite a lot of companies, I think, that were on her Cloud City stand and that she's obviously taken an interest in, and there's been some investments, hasn't there, since then, and not just to Togi, she's announced some other things. So, but I still think it would have been better in a way for her to go over there and have a booth and a presence and because it almost gives the impression that the public cloud's slightly withdrawn from the. I mean, she's not all the public cloud, obviously. Danielle Royston. I mean, she's just like. Well,
she should have. She had like the pom poms and the big hand. She should have like a cloud hat. a big foam cloud hat that she wears to make herself the face of the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, I think she should have had not a cloud city, because she obviously wouldn't have been able to call it that, and I think that's maybe the reason she didn't want to do it, to call it a cloud village. But she could have had her own DM, like stand, and it would have been DM. Why did I say DM? DR stand. Yeah, exactly.
She'd be direct messaging her.
DR stand, yes, and I think it would have been a better thing to do than just not to have anything apart from her, really. But,
and I mean, hopefully we'll bump into her.
But the clouds are there, obviously. AWS
that's what I was going to steer you towards. AWS, Microsoft, Google, other players. Do you think they're going to be potentially a bigger presence than ever in terms of visibility? Or is the annoying term Americans use, optics?
Do you know what? I don't know, because I got outreach today by AWS from their guy who heads up their telco thing, asking if I want to set up an interview, which is quite late in the day.
Implies that they're only just getting their shit together.
And
they haven't got in touch with me, but I don't think I'm on their Christmas card list. The amount of
I don't think I am either.
Borderline libelous shit I've written about them in the past.
I know last year, I don't think any of them went at all, did they? I think they all just had virtual stuff.
Right.
But that's not saying anything, because last year was odd.
So they didn't turn up to Danielle's thing.
Right, and I'm pretty sure they do have a physical presence and stands.
I mean, I'm not saying they didn't. I'm asking the question.
I mean, I don't know what, in terms of their own presence at the show, I don't really know, but I certainly think there'll be a big talking point.
Yeah.
And they will have executives there, clearly, and there'll be a lot of discussion about the public cloud in telecom.
Yes, and to reiterate, and this is probably, along with Open RAN, the most sort of persistent topic we've had in this pod for the last year. To reiterate, it's the what I characterise as a Faustian pact, which is all the positives you get from the public cloud, and that you've got someone else handling your physical infrastructure. They're adding all kinds of special sauce in terms of services and analytics and software. Cool shit that you then don't have to either buy or optimize for yourself. But the flip side is that you've now got probably one of those three you're basically renting your infrastructure to them. You're renting your IT to them, or from them. Sorry.
Yeah.
And they can shift the goalposts whenever they want. I mean, there'll be service level agreements. Not many people will be subject to the Parler treatment that I've banged on about. But I still think AWS will look back on what it did with Parler as a bad move for itself, because what it did was alert people to the fact that this is possible. No one's got any time for Parler. Everyone wrote it off as a sort of Trumpy mad thing. Trump's just launched a fucking social network. Apparently.
I know.
And for the record, I'll defend Parler, but I'm not interested in Trump's social network. I'm not interested in any echo chambers.
Yeah.
But what I am interested in is plurality.
Yeah.
Is for people to have choice. And AWS unilaterally decided to take that choice away in the form of Parler, and they signalled that they can do that to anyone. Like we've got, it's a bit of a tangent, I won't do it for very long. We've got all this crazy shit going on in Canada right now, where anyone who donated to these truckers who were holding up Ottawa is now getting their bank account frozen by the government.
So that's something like The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, isn't it? It's just crazy.
Yeah. Or something, even more dystopian.
Well, that's pretty dystopian, that book.
Yeah, and I was going to go as far as the inevitable 1984.
Yeah. But they specifically freeze.
I haven't read Handmaid's Tale, so okay.
They freeze women's accounts and
right. Well, there we go. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's very accurate.
She. I mean, it's a bit of a tangent, but I think the book was written in the 1980s, and she sort of predicted digital money. That the use of and the end of currency.
Yeah,
not crypto. No, paying for stuff with your card and stuff.
Just virtual money as opposed to notes.
Not crypto. Not using, which has happened in the pandemic. Not using notes anymore. Nobody accepts them even. It's ridiculous. How can you not accept legal tender? But it made it easier for the government to then introduce this move to
well, I mean,
to cancel payments rather.
I play around with that in my book, Identity Crisis, available at Amazon. Where the idea it's more the sort of social credit thing, where instead of getting money you get tokens, but they're conditional. There was a recent Rogan podcast. Pierre's going to hate me now. I'm going off on a big Rogan tangent. I won't do it for long, Pierre. where he had Majid Nawaz, and it was delayed for weeks because he recorded the Majid Nawaz when it was kicking off, when we were talking about it on the pod. Anyway, Majid just went off on all kinds of shit, but there was one thing he came up was the concept of programmable digital currency. So states are thinking of getting into cryptocurrency, Bitcoin type of stuff, but it's state owned and it's programmable, which basically turns it into a token or a voucher. So you get paid, Informa pays you 10 million quid, which is probably what you get paid by Informa. But
close.
But that goes into your account, and it's not quid, it's 10 million, UK coins. But those UK coins can have conditions attached to how you spend them. So let's say it could be something simple like health, and you've had too many fucking pizzas this month.
Yeah.
And you get to 20th of the month, and I'm going back in for the pizza. And he goes, nah, mate, you've had enough of that.
Isn't this what they do in China already?
Well, it's social credit.
Yeah.
So that's what Nawaz was banging on about, is social credit introduced through currency. Yeah. Anyway, I'll stop there. But this is the central downside point. This is my real tinfoil hat issue. I think it's about centralized anything.
Yeah.
I don't think Amazon or Microsoft or Google or any other public cloud player are intrinsically malevolent.
No.
I think they're like any other company. They just want to make money. But what's going on right now is that governments and regulators are putting a lot of pressure on these companies because they've got so big and so powerful and so omnipotent. They're getting a lot of pressure from governments. And my theory, I probably articulated this on the pod before. My theory is, yes, I think it's right that that regulators should try and catch up with this oligopoly. They do have too much power.
Yeah.
And I've always said this about unfettered free markets, that you need regulation. But what I fear, and I don't have any proof of this is just my Alex Jones conspiracy theory, what I fear is there will be some horse trading between big government and big tech, where they go, we'll turn off the heat on you as long as you fucking play ball.
Yeah.
And playing ball is manifested through things like AWS cutting off Parler. And I still think of that as a canary in the coal mine. I'd be delighted if I was wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of that, but I think there are other worries about it as well. And I think there's a certain level of sort of hypocrisy, really, almost in the industry that this ties in with Open RAN, and I'm sure I've said this before, but we've got this concern that operators seem to have about being reliant on a small number of RAN equipment vendors, and this desire,
they're reliant on a tiny number of
to get
cloud.
Other companies in, and yet they're that people like AT&T, it seems, and Dish are very happy to do these all-in deals where they're putting the crown jewels into AWS kind of data centers, the core of the network, the bit that even defenders of Huawei didn't want, to sort of, and it's kind of,
they realise that we can't let them anywhere near that.
And like you say, it's this sort of tenancy relationship, and I to me, it's just this sort of inevitable slide that seems to be going on in telecom as well, where it's almost the diminution of the service providers.
Yeah.
They spin something off and they sell it, or they list it.
And then we've got the towers as well. So they're basically becoming this sort of thin client.
Yeah, and then you outsource your IT stuff and you put it in an AWS data center.
It's like they all become MVNOs, isn't it?
Yeah, and what becomes left at the end of all this, and this is the other reason I think the public clouds are dangerous. I mean, we talked about Edge earlier and these latency services. I mean, public cloud comes into this in a massive way because it's companies like AWS with its wavelength technology that you get people like Verizon and Vodafone turning to and forming partnerships with for new edge services, for these kind of sub 10 millisecond latency services. And the idea is that AWS just has this community of developers in the millions that they could never possibly match. But you kind of think to yourself, I mean, it's presented to you as a sort of win-win situation where they both benefit and there's some kind of revenue sharing agreement that nobody wants to tell you about. But you sort of think, years ago, operators did not want to be in those kinds of relationships. They wanted to be the guys that were controlling the edge, and they didn't really want the public clouds involved if possible. And they wanted to be calling all the shots, and they saw this as an area where they could get in with the kind of physical infrastructure that they've got and get ahead of the game. And now it seems like that's the thing to do. You have an edge strategy, there's a public cloud involved, and I just sort of think where does this all lead? It's almost like that. You can sort of see, if you look into the future, that the world just becomes, if this trend carries on, the world just becomes this place where you get a network service from AWS or Microsoft or Google, and it's on
one of those three just provides everything.
One of those two just provides everything on this infrastructure, and it's and
certainly everything digital.
Every country has those clouds, and and I know you've got companies like Vodafone saying at the moment, which I kind of go along with to a certain extent. They're trying to hire all these software engineers, and part of that's about having the ability to actually move.
We can't make the point you've just made and then not applaud Vodafone's
move things around from one platform to another and not be tied to one, and have more sort of independence from big tech as well as systems integrators, and be able to control their strategy more. But they're the only one I'm aware of who's talking about it in that way, and it's very much a sort of unproven thing whether they can make that work. I mean, it's not going to be an easy thing to do for them, I don't think. So, I'm actually encouraged by the pushback you hear. I mean, we went to the BT thing I was mentioning last week. It was Ray actually at Telecom TV who asked the question: how does public cloud fit in with your 5G core standalone strategy? And it's probably unsurprising because Neil McRae had already been on Twitter, hadn't he, saying, suckers.
And obviously, and Ray was at that dinner with Neil McRae as well.
Where he was expressing reservations about the public cloud. And Neil McRae wasn't at this event, by the way. It was other guys, but they were saying they have no plans at all at the moment to have, the public cloud doing the sort of thing that AT&T's doing with it's Microsoft Azure, I think, isn't it? In that case, they would just view that as something they wouldn't want to do. So I'm
going to wrap it up at this stage because I think we've done like an hour and a half, and Pierre's got shit to do.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to feel the presence of those beers I've just had. So I think, to wrap up that public cloud bit, I think it's going to be interesting conversations, depending on who you speak to, about how various other people, obviously if you talk to AWS or Google or Microsoft or Danielle Royston, they're going to be up for it. But what does everyone else have to say about it? And what do they say off the record as well, in terms of whether it's an unalloyed good or whether it's something they're a bit more cautious about.
Yeah.
All right, cool. We'll wrap it up there. So there's your Mobile Congress preview. If you're at the show, feel free to come up to me and tell me how great you think the podcast is. In fact, if you think it's shit, come up and tell me as well. But I might fight you. And I'm big. But yes, I'm looking forward to being there and looking forward to meeting the telecoms world. So, and keep your eyes peeled. Maybe about a week later, we're planning on recording a pod at the show. Hopefully, I mean, it's all a bit hectic, but hopefully we'll have someone from Orange there. Hopefully we'll have Mary Clark on it. Ian might come in late because he's got some other shit going on. We might get Andrew, Deputy Editor of Telecoms.com. We might get a general jamboree. So check that one out.
I'll definitely come in. But I might be late.
Yeah. And that'll be from the show floor. So check it out. And other than that, thanks a lot for listening. Cheers. Bye.